So we're gonna try all these textures that you would see on living things. So what I would do is first open up your workbook to a new page. And then put a line through the center horizontally. And 2 vertical lines. So we have 6 boxes to work with. And then in each box, we're gonna label. So the first one we have hair. Next we'll do cloth. Then we'll do reptiles and scales. And then we'll do, what's next? We'll do 1 feather. What did I miss? Fur. And wrinkles. Okay, so everyone has different hair textures. Some people have wavy hair, curly hair, kinky hair, straight hair. So I highly recommend working from a reference, but for today, I'm just gonna do one hair style, which is gonna be this wavy. So what I do is I'll draw the general shape of a strand of, like a clump of hair, which is the outline, and then a couple other like wisps. One more here, and then one coming out from the bottom. So these are all like the general outline of the hair. Once you've established the outline, you can strengthen it a bit so you know which is which. And there might be like one more strand over here. So then it's really just about laying in the highlights and the mid-tones. So I'm gonna block in, remember that term, we're gonna block in the darkest values. So I'm gonna block in really dark, using more like hatching lines than like scribbling, because I think people tend to scribble for hair, but it's really more like flowy, and hatching is better, I think. So next to every hard outline that you have, like match the value by pressing harder there. So I'm just laying in the darkest values right now. I'm not putting any midtones in yet. A couple lines will help like kind of delineate, okay, this is like a darker shade and then it gets lighter. This is a darker shade here. Okay, so I'm gonna pause there till you kind of have established this abstract shape that we have. Okay, so now it's really just about adding the middle values, so like 6 and 3. So press a little less hard, closer to the darkest value, and then gradually you're gonna release pressure. So you're creating like a gradient in each shape of, it's a clump of hair, right? So in this hair reference, we have like some dark and then it gets shiny. So you're gonna leave a little bit the same color as the paper for the shininess. All right, and then, so that's like one type of hair. If you wanted to try like super curly hair, like super dense hair, it's like more scumbling and it's tighter packed. The looser you get with your lines, it looks like a highlight, okay? And if you wanted to draw like really boingy curls, you would create like several teardrop shapes that get smaller, and it's like a spiral that goes down. And then straight hair is like a little bit harder, but you would have this general shape, but just straight lines, and then highlights and lowlights between the lines. Okay, so that's like the gist. But I would definitely use a reference, either a photo or a drawing of hair. It's easier to start with a drawing. Okay, next we're gonna go for cloth. Are you ready for that or not? Okay, so I did some different types of cloth here. Like this would be maybe an arm, like a hoodie, or like a pant leg, and that's kind of the general fold. Or this is like a dress or curtains, kind of like that effect. So let's try the curtain effect first. So you're just gonna draw 3 kind of like a spider web shape. Gotta look at my reference. And then from the top, this is the tricky part. From the top of each one, it's gonna curve like the shape of a letter J. And then this becomes the fold, so it just hooks back in. Or it's straight back up, just depending on the reference. This one's a little less hooked. So that's like where the fabric folds. So far, so good. You have that? So this is behind the fabric, so it's gonna be filled in with darker value, maybe like a 6 or 7 on the value scale. And then you just shade a gradient between each line, a value scale gradient. So like from maybe 5 to 1. And leave a little bit light at the very end. Okay, and then let's try like a arm or pant leg. So just draw like just draw two lines. They can be slightly bigger at the bottom. And then you're gonna add some shapes coming off the parallel lines. So this is like where the fabric folds. Let me check my reference. Okay, sometimes it goes just like up. And sometimes there's like an entire fold. And maybe like a couple bigger folds towards the bottom. Okay, and then where you have the lines, actually, are you ready? Can I go move on to the shading? You have this shape. So the shading is just like a value scale under each line, just like the hair. So the highlights are the shapes that kind of pop out from the rest of the cloth. This one, like, maybe not so much, but I think you get the idea. They could, the folds could probably come out a little more. And like they droop a little with gravity because it's like, it's floppy cloth, right? So like that's what I'm going for. Okay, that's a little better. If you use your eraser for highlights on the top parts of the folds, that can help. Okay, the next one I think is a little easier because it's like laying bricks. So, for like snake scales, let's see, can you see this? Like this. You would just draw kind of a diamond shape with a rounded bottom. So a diamond like this, but this is rounded. And then they're laid in like bricks. So where one bottom ends, then the top of another starts. So it's a little tricky, but I think you'll get the idea. A little tricky, but not that tricky. Okay, that's all I'm gonna do. And then I would shade the top right, imagining the light source is like coming this way. Just shade each one with some hatching lines for time's sake. So it looks like they're a little bit more three-dimensional. Maybe they're like glinting in the sun. And you can add a little shadow on the bottom left of each scale. Then fish scales are a little easier because they're just little U shapes. So you would just do consecutive U shapes. And then the key is the next row starts at the center of each curve. So they overlap like that. Similar to like bricks or like a stucco roof. There's a lot of stucco roofs here. I'm sure you've seen that before, right? So a little bit of shading can go a long way too. Just a little hatching in each one. And the last one is gonna be like chameleon skin. If you've ever seen like a two-toed chameleon, they have really bumpy skin. So I just draw a bunch of bigger circles and then connect those with small circles. So it's like they have some bigger bumps and then some little bumps. So if you're doing like a mystical fantasy creature, all these different skin textures can enhance your design or your artwork. You could even like invent your own dragon skin or something using what we already know about forms in biology. Okay, let's move on to the feather. So I'm just gonna do one feather, as opposed to like a collection of feathers, but you know, this is the detail of one feather, which I feel like everyone likes to know. So I just draw one whiplash line to start with. Then I draw the shape of the feather from the top to the bottom, which is like kind of like a leaf shape. It's wider at the bottom, it gets pointier at the top. And then I like to break the feather in a few spots, meaning like the feather has clumped together, this part of the feather broke apart. So if you just put a couple lines and then erase, it breaks the feather. And then there's a couple like flyaway wisps at the bottom, like the downy part of the feather. So just a couple lines there. And then we're gonna lay in the darkest values just using hatching lines. So following the curve of the feather, so it's slightly to the right, going up. And on this side, it's gonna come out. It's like veins of a leaf. And up. Okay, so then we're gonna shade, it's gonna be darker, closer to the, what is it, the quill? Yeah, the quill of the feather, all the way up. And then there's a bit of value on the outside. So I would use hatching lines. I would go a little bit more choppy, because like some will be longer, some will be shorter. And then use your eraser to make highlights in the middle. So that's like the shiny part. On the other side, same thing. So darker towards the quill. Follow the original lines that you set. And then on the outside, some more value. And then you can erase for some highlight down the center. And then I would just put a darker outline for the quill with a little more confidence, going all the way up to the top. Okay, next one we're gonna do some animal fur. Do you need a minute to catch up? Okay, so I'm gonna move on to fur. So fur is a lot like hair. This is long fur. So you're gonna have some kind of chunks of long fur and they overlap. So this could be like a lion or a wolf. Save a little space for short fur. So short fur is just like a series of hatching lines. They kind of overlap. They make like their own little brick system, but just with hairs instead of scales. And then they're denser in some spots, so it would just like put more hatching lines in some areas and less in others. Similar to like grass texture. So then for the long fur, you can start shading in the darker values, which are gonna be darker towards the edge of your lines that you put. With the shiny highlight in the middle. And then the next tier down is gonna get a little darker because these ones are overlapping. So you can press like a 7 or an 8 for the next layer of fur that's underneath, and then create a gradient so it's lighter towards the bottom. So if you ever watch like Disney cartoons, they're gonna have a lot of cool animal fur textures that you can check out. So Lion King, or like Beauty and the Beast, they would have a lot of great references for you to see like how to draw fur texture in a cartoon. Okay, I'm just gonna come around and check how you're doing so far. I'll give you a stamp. my advice, go a little darker in the low lights than you're currently going, okay? So in the low lights, press harder, make it as hard as you can go with it, level 8. It's gonna make the contrast pop more, okay? And then slowly release pressure to make a gradient. Okay, last one we have is wrinkles. So I used elephant skin as my reference, but humans have wrinkles too, for sure. So we're gonna try some wrinkles, which is a little more complicated, this structure, and this is an extreme close-up, but it's kind of like veins in a leaf again. So just start with a single line. It's an organic line, doesn't have to be exactly the same as mine. And then another line that maybe comes in to touch it and comes back out. And then this shape becomes something. So it's kind of like tree bark too. Or like if you've ever looked at plant cells under a microscope, it kind of looks like that. Okay, and then there's gonna be a couple horizontal lines coming in. So kind of randomly place those. And then, so these are the grooves. It's just a matter of shading each one with the value scale. So I'll do one as an example. You press harder around the outline and the groove and slowly release pressure so you have a gradient inside of each shape. All right, so those are some textures that we find in nature on living creatures. I hope it helps, and let's spend the last couple minutes just building in a little darker values, okay? So I want you to have a spectrum of values from like 1 to 8 all the way in each box, okay?